And it's great. It's already, everyone's already kind of mentioned in there why they're still here, is really about that sense of something else is going on, and something, the sense that something needs to change. And so again, the 6 week course, no 6 week course is going to change everything, but part of the process, part of the methodology of this course is to possibly, if we can together, push us in a different direction than what we're used to in our degrees at UBC, and I'd say kind of beyond that in our mainstream educational system. So it's really not about a 6 week course and all of a sudden we're off in a different direction, but it's a 6 week course. It's going to be a bit uncomfortable. It has some dimensions to it that we can work through, and we'll see where it takes us. We suspect it'll take you somewhere. We don't think it's going to take everyone to the same place, but it's really about being present to the stories, to the affect, and to where it's taking you. So that's really a big part of the design of the course, which makes it a bit unique in terms of what we usually offer in LFS for sure. But I'd say broadly across the campus. So reiterating the bus methodology, the bus is a really important tool or toy that we're going to use to help us give some language and to help us take a moment to pause and think through, okay, what's happening in us right now? And so one of the narratives we're often taught is that we are a singular individual, but I'd say it's quite common to recognize that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different voices going on, a lot of different folks on our bus who want control. Maybe they want to hide in the bus. Maybe they're arguing with other members of the bus. And it's not just what you're hearing or saying, but also saying, but what you're feeling from these different members of the bus. So often we'll ask you to check in with your bus as a kind of a way of pausing and checking in before we jump into to a narrative, or before we jump into wanting to talk about what we're experiencing. It's really an opportunity to develop that nuance and that space to say, what is going on inside of me? Because there's likely lots going on, and paying attention to and seeing the characters on your bus and giving them a bit more space is a great way of understanding where we're being pulled, what types of urges and behaviors emerge in us, as well as where are these sensations, what are the affective states that are coming through this dynamic on our bus. So we'll often use this. We'll say, check in with your bus, or we'll often say, pardon me. Here's my slide. We'll have to ask you kind of to map the responses that you're experiencing of who wants the space, who wants to be heard, who's hiding, who wants to have control, who's arguing, as well as beyond the bus. What type of landscape are you feel like your bus is taking you through right now? What's the weather like? What's the terrain like? Are you on a road, or are you off-roading? Are you in some fog, or is there sunshine coming through? So those types of like metaphorical language, often we stay clear of metaphors in our STEM degrees and our natural science courses. But in this course, we're going to definitely double down and get used to using these types of metaphorical ways of discussing what's going on inside us, to communicate to each other the complexities of what's going on. And so one great way that we've noticed and we found is helpful for thinking about responding is to acknowledge the complexity that you have this singular identity based on how we kind of define each other in terms of modernity. But you can say like, oh, one passenger on my bus is feeling this way, and they're kind of in tension with this other passenger, and learning how to navigate, like, who is this passenger? Where did they come from? Is it part of my childhood? Is it the voice of a friend or a parent, or is it the media coming through, the messaging, the socializing I've been having? So it's a helpful way of thinking through and dividing and pausing and noticing what's going on within us. And so we offer this sentence STEM as a way to think through, and so feel free to use it, or if it doesn't work for you at all, that's fine too. But we do find it helpful to give some space and to air to that the complexity within us. And really, the why we do this is we know that in this course, and the term uncomfortable discomfort is going to come up a lot. But I would say I was this way a lot, and I still am at times. Is that I often like to choose my experiences based on how comfortable I'm going to be, but not just in the learning sciences, but just kind of at an intuitive level. We know that if we always stay within our comfort zone, it's nice, but is that really what we need all the time? And so at some times we need to intentionally get into spaces that push us into the learning zone, which is often called, or sometimes you'll say called the stretch zone. It's where in some ways, I like to think of it as expanding your comfort zone, but it's a little bit more than that. It's about knowing that you're going to be in a position where you might not know the folks around you. You might feel out of place. You might feel like you're new to the skill set or the knowledge domain, and that just makes you a little bit less at ease. And that less at ease is that there's a bit more room to that, like at times uncomfortable. But one thing we also know about the material we're going to talk about and the way that we'll be asking you to describe it and to engage with it, it can also quickly lead to going beyond the learning zone and into kind of a panic zone. And so we really encourage you to be attentive to what's going on in your body, because your body has the wisdom of letting you know when you cross that threshold from the stretch zone or the learning zone into the panic zone. And if at any time you're feeling that coming up, at any time, we'll never be upset if you just turn your camera off or if you log off, take a break. It's really important to develop that discernment, because often once we get into that panic zone, it can be a bit of a vortex and it can stay for a while, and it could last and start impacting us beyond just the course, into our lasting over a week, or kind of drawing you into other feelings of anxiety that can kind of be out of control. So if at any point you feel like you're slipping into that zone of a bit too much, take a breath. There's many things you can do. I often recommend checking in with your, grounding yourself, checking in with your seat bone, checking with your feet, feeling where you're at. Often people will recommend looking around your room, standing up, looking at the doors and windows, just kind of taking a break from whatever it is that's unsettling you. And you can also do humming or rocking back and forth, and just kind of getting your body to resettle as much as you can. So be attentive. We don't want to be in the panic zone. We don't want to bring you into the panic zone. And sometimes it happens quickly. And sometimes it happens with a weight that we're not ready, because some of the material that we are going to be engaging in, some of this material is likely to tap into the wisdom of your body that's not just from you. It's historical. It's ancestral. And when that happens, when the historical ancestral teachings are coming to us, it can be quite fast, quite heavy, with a lot of pressure. So just be attentive to it. And the thing about it is that we often are not in control of when it happens. So you might, one reading I might do and a reading you might do, I might react, I would react in a completely different way. You might react in a different way. So it's really important to just be attentive to what your body is saying, and not to both try to control it, because it's often uncontrollable, but also not to get lost into it and be kind of drawn in. So be part of the methodology of this course is really giving space for the wisdom of our bodies, for pausing, for avoiding narrating and try to explain and justify, but just sitting and listening to what's going on. Because the material we're going to engage in is likely to come through you, to come through your body. And when it does, if it hits hard, recognize it, pull back, and realize when you have a chance, when you come back to be unsettled, like, what was it that was being communicated to me through my body in that moment? Can I come back to it? Can I just get a taste of it again and draw back? And so that's an ongoing pattern and habit that we're all going to need to increasingly engage with and develop as we move through this type of decolonizing material, acknowledging the violences and the harms and the complicity that is essentially not equally distributed, but is a part of modernity, the process of modernity, is going to come up. And our bodies are truly a source of wisdom for understanding where we need to go. Our minds are part of the narrative of modernity, is trying to convince us that our minds are actually more powerful, but it is not true. Our minds are useful and powerful, but for some material, our body is going to be the teacher. But sometimes it's going to be a bit much. And so pulling back, recentering, reorienting. And if you do feel very activated, I don't recommend doing things like meditating or yoga or calming. It's a type of activation that often needs to be moved through the body. My partner appreciates it when I vacuum and clean the toilets rigorously when I feel activated. So it's like a win-win for me. I can actually pitch in a bit more and I can get the energy going or go for a brisk walk or whatever it is. But recognize that it's an activation. The energy is coming through you. It's in your body and it needs to also move away. It can't be bottled up and ignored or pretended it's not happening. It has to go. And that's not going to, this isn't like going to fix anything, but it's one way of preventing it from being blocking. Because blocking energy over and over time is not healthy for your body and is not healthy for your family, for your community, for your culture. So again, it's a process, and we don't often, actually I'd say we never talk about this in LFS courses or natural science courses, because if you think of the culture of STEM, it's often about pretending we don't have bodies, we don't have emotions. But in this course, we know the materials can be intense, so we need to say at the beginning, check in with your bus, check in with who's going on, what's happening in your body, and then even going a bit further or incorporating into the bus metaphor, a real attention to the somatic experiences you're having. And so I don't want to say this, I'm not saying this is therapy. This isn't, we're not going to try to do therapy with each other. I'm not qualified. That's not what this is, but it's being attentive to our bodies and listening and not doing the STEM culture bullshit of pretending that things aren't happening. We need to learn to listen to our bodies. All right. So we'll come back to that a bit. So again, this is the idea of how will you know what zone you're in? It's that your body will let you know. And so sometimes we'll just ask, we'll say, okay, pause. We're just going to pause. If you think about how our university is structured, and this is why I really appreciate the GRS view of life, is like 4, 5, 6 years, that's fine. Taking 5 courses a term, is a guaranteed way of not being able to pause and understand what is going on and why am I here. It's such an intense pace, so much information, so much pressure, exams, assignments, that we rarely can actually have time to listen to our bodies, listen to what else might be communicating to us because of the pace and the hecticness of what's going on. So in this course, at times, we might just be sitting in silence for a bit. But that's so we can calm down and see what's being communicated through us. So I might say to you, or Vanessa might say, pause. And it's not that we're trying to be rude or to interrupt, but we might be seeing in your body, in the way your eyes are, or your breathing, or your body language, that, okay, let's just pause. Something's happening. Let's just pause. Let's check in. Let's just notice. And then what we'll ask you to do, and we're going to go through an activity like this, is to write down. So one of the, especially for me, for a white man, I have many blind spots. When I'm activated and I start trying to narrate and justify what's happened, what I'm seeing, that's often where I start being even more harmful. So often when we say pause, check in, notice, it's also a way of like letting that narration go down and just letting the feelings in the body come up and sitting with that. And we will not ask you to then just like explain or tell us what's happening. It's actually, again, coming back to the rule number one, we're not as interested in what you're thinking as much as being attentive to and giving space to what you're feeling. So with that in mind, we're going to ask you to pay attention to the constrictions. Some people often talk about, so when we are talking about issues of violences and harms on colonization, some folks talk about they hold their breath, or they clench their jaws, like they're holding, they're bracing, their body is automatically kind of protecting you from something. So notice the constrictions, notice the tension, the pressure, or the aching. Notice where in your body that's happening. Is it in your hips? Is it in your airways? Your shoulders, are they coming up? Your back? Is it your knees or your feet? Like recognize where it's happening in your body, because again, that's your body communicating to you, letting you know something's happening. At times too, though, notice if there's a tingling or an opening or a lightness happening. Those are also, so we're not just about focusing on the negative valence. It's also about acknowledging and noticing when we're feeling a bit more free, a bit more open. Maybe it's someone's comment is helping us connect, or something is coming up based on a comment or a story. It's connecting back to something else we weren't aware was there, and it's an opening space. So recognize that, and get used to seeing it if you can. If we have our screens on, notice it in each other's bodies, noticing what's happening. I find I often, when I start really digging into the material surrounding the historical and ongoing violences of colonization in Canada, I notice my posture start folding in. I notice my airways start getting a bit constricted. My stomach starts getting in knots and gets aching. And so it changes my whole body and being. And in some ways, with Zoom, I get to see it more often. Although I try not to stare at myself on Zoom, but I get to see myself changing, and it helps me remember and recognize and learn from that, and see where my body is trying to bring me and what direction it's trying to direct me towards. At the same time, feeling nothing, feeling numb, those are also affective states and affective responses. They're very protective responses. Feeling numb, when we hear about 215, you might have heard this in the news media or in the comment section or talking to folks, like the news about the 215 unmarked graves made me feel numb. And numbness is important. Numbness is protection. So recognize if you're feeling numb or you're feeling nothing. It doesn't mean that you're not being affected. It means your body is protecting you in a certain way. And feeling nothing and feeling numb over time has its own consequences. So just recognize what your body is communicating with you when we go through these materials, especially next week. And you'll see, if you've seen the recording for next week's lecture, we're going to be talking about and asking you to think through the habit of modernity, of the denials of systemic harm and violences. And no one's off the hook. And that doesn't mean everyone's equally involved or equally experiencing it, but it means this is part of what colonization and imperialism and modernity is bringing to us. So notice your body. Don't let it go too far. Notice if it is, and then pull back. Reorient, ground, breathe, and move. So we're saying this. I don't want to get too, like, there's a bit of a challenge here. Like, I don't want to get too, like, I don't want to make this sound like we're heading into something super intense, but at the same time we are, and it's just unequally distributed, and we don't know when it's going to happen. So that's why I'm spending a little bit more time on this part of the process. Almost, I feel, as a bit of a responsibility. If we're going to ask you to engage with this material, we need to spend a bit of time preparing you for what is likely going to happen. And the grief as well. And the other part of these somatic responses, is they tend to linger. So it's perfectly normal. Your body is not defective if 2 days later you still feel a little bit off, a little bit, you just can't put your finger on it. You get annoyed by things that shouldn't be annoying you. Again, it's your body reminding you the impact of this. That one of the worst things I think our socialization and our education system does is to make us think that we're defective when our body's actually trying to communicate these very intense emotional experiences. So it's not that your body isn't defective, it's protective. And recognize that these things last. Just because we stop the course, we stop the reading, doesn't mean your body isn't still teaching you and experiencing it. So it's a lot, but I think it's with this practice, this is part of that affective stamina. Because again, the assumption is that, and based on what everyone has said here, you're going to be bringing yourself into more uncomfortable spaces. Like what Alicia said is that she's taking things up, she's bringing a bit of chaos into her work. And to be honest with you, that if you're working in the government, you know what the government means? A bit of chaos. I mean, a bit, maybe even more than a bit. But that is going to have an impact on your body and others around you. And when we don't have the stamina to manage that, we can get pretty nasty with each other. So you just have to be ready. You just have to be effectively ready for what being in discomfort really means to you and also to the people around you. And with that stamina, we can keep going at it, because the chaos, the discomfort is just getting started for many people. It's been there for many, many, many other people very intensely. But for others, it's just getting started. And I think it's fair enough to say that we're already noticing we're not really that well prepared for it. So part of this course is that affective stamina, which means we'll be pausing, we'll be noticing, and we'll be kind of working through this as much as we can. It's going to be a bit of a journey. So let's try it out. And so I do not want to try not to bring something that's super intense into this part of the course, but just I want more of the trying out the habit that we're going to try and draw upon in the course and the tutorials is the idea I'm going to ask you. If everyone has pencil, paper, and a pen or a pencil, just have it beside you when we do. So I always have my notebook. Just have it something near you that you can actually write something out. And so what we're going to do is we're going to draw on the bus methodology and ask you to pay attention to the passengers on your bus. What's showing up? What's going on? And how is it? And who's making some noise? Who's arguing? Who wants to take control? As well as what are you feeling? What are the sensations in your body? What are the affective states and where? Are you feeling constriction? Do you notice that your shoulders are getting sore, your neck, your jaw? Are you feeling lightness? Are you feeling numb? So those are the things that we'll write about. We'll just take 2 minutes. We'll say, okay, pause, let's write. And then that's how we'll kind of work through some of the materials as they come up. All right. So I have two images. So these are the languages that some still exist, some have been lost, but this was the landscape of the languages in North America prior to colonization. I just want you to pay attention to the diversity, to the colors that are just representing the diversity of knowledge and languages and cultures and ways of being that existed on this continent and still do exist, although some have been lost. And at least for Canada, this is what we often see and think about and is imprinted in our media, in our textbooks, is reinforced through all the different ways that we talk about the nation state of Canada. But right now, it's just thinking about what happened. What happened to the land and what happened to the bodies, the communities? What's been happening for 400 years on this land? This transition to Canada. So something happened. Something is still happening on the land, to the people, to all of us, to go between these two images. So I just want you to take a moment and write down, think about, what are your passengers saying? Who's making noise? Who wants to hide? And write down words you're feeling this in your body. And just write it down. I'll just put the timer on, a few minutes, just write it down. All right. So sometimes after writing, we'll ask if anyone has anything has emerged, anything they're learning, anything they're noticing. Never about the narrative or the explanation or the reasoning or the argument, but just what's coming through. What's your body letting you know? And we'll do that every once in a while in the course and the tutorials, just to help our bodies resettle, just to help us give us a moment to connect and to think through what's going on. And then I really encourage you to do this. Have a pen and paper or pen, paper, pencil next to you while you're going through the readings, while you're going through the documentaries. Make it a habit of pausing and letting it come through you. Because without it, without a practice, without something that directs your attention towards your body, we're really not going to be able to develop that affective stamina. Because eventually you won't have to write it. It'll become natural. It'll become a part of your habit of being, your habit of checking in and recognizing. So sometimes I do this. If I dare to even glance at the comment section, I recognize I'm just not emotionally strong enough sometimes to go into the comment section. But when I do, I write and I recognize that it's all coming through. Same with some of the readings that we have here. I keep my pen and paper and I have to write it out and I have to recognize and pause. because most of my socialization is just to argue and try to stay up here, and it's not healthy, and it's not helping. And so that is the habit I'm trying to unlearn. And so this is the habit. This may or may not work for you, but it's try it out. If it does, great. If it doesn't, think through what can you do to help reorient yourself towards your body and here. And again, sometimes if it hits heavy and hard, it's often historical or ancestral. Our bodies are still connected, and they're conduits through things that are going to come through you. And when it does, it hits hard. And so recognize it, learn from what it's trying to teach you in the moment, why it's happening. And this practice will do it. I often think that the 5 courses term is designed to prevent us from reconnecting to where else we could be learning from who else is speaking to us and speaking through us. Yolanda?
I was going to share that I'd never seen the merc before this. I'd only seen the one that's on the, yes, that one you're just showing. I'd never seen it before. And I just, for me personally, like, I relate to this somehow because I'm from Africa, and Africa has gone through like colonization, right? And just from seeing this, a lot of like emotions started coming up, like it's just like the words that were thrown in me, like suppression. So many things have been lost, so much valuable languages and the teachings. And it's such a sad feeling, because even for myself, like, I speak my native languages, but there's some that my parents speak that I cannot speak. And then I realize that is also like, it has spread, like even where I am settled right now, like there is so much that has been lost, and I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, no, like I'd say right now, like where though, like where, what did that feel like when it was coming up?
I feel so helpless. And it feels inside my heart, it's just like this heavy burden and grief, like things that I want to run away from. I don't want to face that. I don't want to. I just want to be like, it's too much.
Yeah. And so you're saying it's kind of like in your chest area, like in your, like a weight, a pressure.
And I feel that if I continue thinking about it, like I'll feel like I'm choking, like I can't speak anymore. It will come up, and then I'll like, red alert, escape. Yeah.
So I think that, thank you for sharing that, because that's that sensation. Like, everyone be aware of it, because if we go too far, it takes us into a place that is, it's a vortex, and so we don't want to let it get that far, although sometimes it's going to hit. But just be aware and just pause, notice, see what you can do to try to resettle, and then maybe come back to it at another time and just get used to. And so that's part of that stamina, coming back to it, because like Yolanda said, I don't think we're called to avoid it anymore, but each of us has to take on our own responsibility and care for what does that mean for us. But this is just about noticing that our bodies are letting us know the direction we might need to go, or the direction that we'd rather go to stay comfortable. So when we talk about comfort and discomfort, it's not just about like, oh, I'm a little uncomfortable. It's like, at times it's going to be like, I am fucking uncomfortable and I can't handle it right now. And we don't want that to happen. So it's like, pause, come back, but let's learn from it. Yeah. So thank you so much, Yolanda, for sharing that with us. And I'm like, my body now is feeling, yeah. So, okay. I just wanted, we have a bit of time, and Vanessa's going to come back and talk a little bit about a situation in Brazil, and one thing we want to bring into our course right now, to another layer to our assignments and invitations to participate through. So I want to spend some time with that, but just to give you a sense of a little bit of what's making this unique. And I think you have a sense now, but it's the diversity of the content. For that intellectual stamina, we have these bundles. We have scholarly papers, we have exercises, documentaries, forest walks, artistic practices, and pop culture. The goal is to bring in different perspectives that you rarely see in a science-focused faculty by design. But you might notice that it's a lot. There's a lot of content. There's a lot of work here. So part of the intellectual stamina is committing to doing your best to getting through each of the bundles. There's a lot there. We know there's a lot there, but develop that stamina. Come back to it. Especially with the scholarly papers, there's 4 to choose from. You're not required to do them all, to read them all. But what I recommend is reading all of the abstracts and then choosing one from there. Abstracts, maybe a bit of conclusion, and then deciding which one to dive into. And some of them are quite dense, but pace yourself and come back to it. Don't try to go through them all at once. Just so give yourself some time to go through the material. And that's that intellectual stamina that we're trying to develop. The tutorial session we're going to structure in rounds. And we're going to ask you each week, we're going to stick to the same round. It's a structure that's going to allow us to get through some of this material that at times it can be unsettling. We're going to ask you to talk about what came up in round 1. Everyone gets a minute. What came up? What's sticking? What's sticky? What is still unclear? Round 2 is about questions and comments. I'm going to learn how to spell comments on the fly. I wonder statement. Here's what I'm thinking. But we're not trying to fix anything. We're not trying to solve any problems in round 2. In round 3, we're going to ask you to deepen someone else's inquiry. So something you heard from someone else. No advice. We're not going to give advice. We're not going to try and answer anyone's questions, but talk about the layers of what someone else has heard or said and how it resonated with you. So that's round 3. And round 4 is, what are we taking away? What are we leaving behind? So that'll be the structure of our tutorials. We'll do it in rounds. And it's also why we've made our tutorials have 2 different sessions for LFS. So we're going to have there's 16 people in the course. So we'll have about 8 in each tutorial session. I'll send out an email soon and just requesting for you to confirm which tutorial session you'd like to be in, what meets best for your schedule. But that's why we have 2 tutorial sessions, because we want to have space for everyone to get through these rounds and have time to talk about it. And if with up to 20 people, it's hard to do within an hour and 20 minutes. So that's why we have these 2 tutorial sections. So I will send out an email to request, are you confirming you're in this tutorial or that? And we'll go from there. So that is it for me today. I'm going to pass it back to Vanessa. She's going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Brazil and the campaign to help work with communities in Brazil, and how it might be, if you're interested, if you're called to, you can layer it into your assignments in the course.